All right. Good morning, Greg. For today's episode, we're going to be jumping into a case that's sort of been in the news quite a bit and talking about a few things about it. But it's the from Alec Baldwin is involved in the movie Rust that he was making, where
Yep.
the woman was accidentally killed on it while he was practicing in between taking their doing their takes. He was practicing whatever she was having him do, and there was a live round in the gun when there shouldn't have been, and it killed her. And so I want to go
Uh,
over that, but I'm
But
sorry.
before you do,
Yeah.
here's the thing, folks. This is not a Meg episode. This is a really, really good episode.
Yeah.
Stick around for it. So if you think you've heard all of it about the Rush shooting, you haven't.
Right.
And this is the first time you and I are actually going to, scratch the surface of this
Yeah,
table.
because a lot more has come out, and it goes to
Exactly.
a bigger discussion about
Exactly.
some of these cases that we've seen where people are accidentally
Yep.
shot and killed with weapons, to include a family pet was involved in some of these that we've seen. But we'll get to all that.
Hijinks.
But I do want to
Yeah.
talk about some of the elements of this case because I think legally it's a fascinating one. I see all kinds of people bashing Alec Baldwin, saying, yeah, he should go to jail just because they don't like Alec Baldwin and maybe not realizing what legal precedent means and what this could mean for other cases. But
Right.
I'll just go ahead and I don't care about what your thoughts are on Alec Baldwin or who he is or his comedy or his political opinions. I
If it
really
was
don't.
Billy Baldwin, I would change my opinion.
Yeah.
But Alec, come on.
He is the
You
most
know?
successful Baldwin brother. So I just want to get into this, and I'll put the links in the
Yeah.
episode details. But I want to read some of this from. It's actually from a New York Times article on it, and
Okay.
it's a good one because it has links to the other cases that are involved and coming from this. So you can actually just go to this
Do your
one
homework.
and
Yep.
find a whole bunch others. So it's a great little rabbit hole that you can go down. But this is from their reporting, and again, if you want to read it, I'm going to summarize some of it. But Baldwin was told he was assured the gun he was rehearsing with that day did not contain live ammunition, and sat down for that an interview if anyone saw it, and he was sought indemnification from financial liability in the case. And even, I didn't know about this, but a few months ago he sued some of the crew members on the film, claiming that they were responsible for handing him a loaded gun. So this past
Right.
week, prosecutors said they're going to charge him with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter in the killing of the cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, saying they believed he had a duty to ensure that the revolver was safe to handle. So important point we'll get to. We're trying to
Yep.
definitely make it clear that everybody's equal under the law, including A-list actors like Alec Baldwin. That's Andrea Reed, the special prosecutor, said. And we want to make sure the safety of the film industry is addressed and things like this don't happen again. So this armorer
Yeah.
who's on the set, this Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who loaded the gun that day and was responsible for the weapons on the set, will also be charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. And the film had an assistant director, a guy by the name of David Halls. He's the one who handed Alec Baldwin the gun. He took a plea deal not long ago on negligent use of a deadly weapon, I believe was a charge. So
Yep.
in an interview with detectives, Baldwin said the gun should have been cold with no rounds inside. Baldwin's attorney said, there's no reason to believe Baldwin had no reason to believe that there was a live bullet in the gun or anywhere on the movie set. He relied on the professionals with whom he worked, who assured him the gun did not have live rounds. We will fight these charges. We will win. And then you had some of the SAG-AFTRA folks, that's the Screen Actors Guild union, talking about, yes, this was a preventable tragedy, but it was not a failure of duty or criminal act on the part of any performer. So obviously they're the union that represents him, so they're going to
Right.
take his side, right? But I just thought,
Of course.
people chime in with this. Um, like I said, I think it was on Hulu or some where I watched it, but one of the news channels did an interview with him a while back, and he said someone is responsible for what happened. I can't say who that is, but I know it's not me. And so obviously, he's trying to deflect any
Great.
blame.
Great.
District Attorney said in an interview Mr. Baldwin had a duty to ensure the gun and the ammunition were properly checked and that he should never have pointed it at anyone. Okay. And her comment was, you should not point a gun at someone you're not willing to shoot. And we'll talk about basic weapon safety rules, but also this is a movie set, right? So, the armorer who's responsible for the weapons set loaded the gun that day and told investigators she had checked the gun and all 6 cartridges she loaded, but she also remarked, I wished I would have checked it more. Obviously, her attorneys fighting that. Like I said, the guy, Mr. Halls, the assistant director, was the one who took the revolver from some trade that was set up there, and then he handed it to Baldwin, saying out loud, "It's a cold gun," meaning it's to indicate it did not contain live ammunition. So there's a few other sort of facts that I just want to hit. There's a lot you can jump into, but just for the purposes of time, I just want to hit a couple of these other ones too. And they said that, obviously the Gutierrez Reed, the woman who is the armor on the set, was supposed to. There's certain protocols that they have to do to make sure that the rounds are dummies or inert or whatever the proper ammunition is in there. Because some of them are the blank firing ones that still give a loud bang and shoot off powder, that kind of stuff. So they found other live ammunition on the set during the
Yes.
investigation, and including on the top of the cart where the props were that Alec Baldwin was using, right? So part of it, and I believe they found some of it in his belt, like his prop belt, gun belt that he was wearing as part of this Western movie. They found, I believe, live rounds in there. So there's a bunch of other lawsuits during it. And what also came up in the investigation with interviews from the sheriff's office, that a lot of the crew members described what they called a lack of consistent meetings devoted to on-set safety. Some of the crew had quit the night before because about lodging concerns and a few other issues. And one of them said that the filming of gunfight scenes was played very fast and loose, and there was a couple accidental weapons discharges during the filming. So there's a few other that was the big facts of the case that I wanted to hit. Before we jumped into the discussion, just so everyone had a general idea of it. Now, obviously,
Yep.
Alec Baldwin's being charged, which goes to a number of things. Obviously, on this movie set in particular, you have people there that are assigned, you know, their whole job is to ensure safety of those weapon systems. There should be no reason to have live ammunition other than the person who's in control of those weapons will often have a live, weapon with them for security purposes, where they're transporting firearms, to and from movie sets, from areas. So there's certain protocols and procedures that would make sense for that to happen, Greg. But obviously
Yep.
those things should be nowhere near these type of weapons. And there's, how that got mixed in is clearly a lack of safety protocols. Obviously, the armorer too. One of the other facts I did want to mention, also had some other role on that set. I forget what it was, some sort of other assistant helping out with props or something like that, because this was a low budget film, which means when those happens, from what I understand, people have multiple roles, not just a role as a character, but you're the director, but
Seems
you're also
reasonable.
you're also setting up lunch and doing the things that on normal big production
Sure.
shows you would never do. So they're saying, hey, she also had other roles on this. So there's a lot to talk about in there, Greg. It's a fascinating one legally, but it's also a fascinating
Yeah, it
one to
is.
highlight all of the how often these things occur, um, all over the country every single day, with accidental discharges or negligent discharges. I've
Yep.
seen all kinds of different ones in my life, everything from automatic grenade launchers to bolt action rifles where there were negligent
Yes.
discharges. So, but that's obviously within a military or police context, and a live fire situation, meaning at least in those situations there was supposed to be live ammunition and shooting going on either
Exactly.
prior to or after. So a little bit different context, but I have seen a
Right.
lot of those things happen before, even amongst professionals. That's why you have very basic rules. If you follow all of them, there can still be a malfunctioning of the weapon system and have some sort of discharge. However, if you're following all safety rules, it should not result in someone getting injured or killed. So I just want to throw all
Yeah.
that out
So
there. There was kind of a lot, and
no, it's an incredible place to start, Brian. So here's the first thing I would ask anybody that listens to us routinely, or a new listener or viewer: write down the word manslaughter, M-A-N-S, laughter, man's laughter, and there's nothing to laugh about. But let's think in terms of why manslaughter was chosen. Well, let's add a word: involuntary. So involuntary manslaughter is simply the killing of another human being, where it's illegal, it's unlawful, but it was unintentional. And we would never have heard of this case for so long if it hadn't been associated with Alec Baldwin,
right.
who has got decades of Hollywood chops in some of the best in some of the worst films,
Yeah.
and then some of the best television and some of the worst television.
Yeah.
Had we not had this situation, it would have been an addendum. It would have been a remark somewhere in a Hollywood trade magazine.
If this was
right?
a low budget film that didn't have high name profile people in it and was
Exactly.
just some folks out there filming a movie, we never would have heard it.
Exactly.
We likely would not have been talking about it right now.
So that young kid, the folks, do your own homework, because I've got an agenda in my mind and I can't interrupt it or I'll have to start all over again. But the gosh darn kid that was related to Bruce Lee that was shot on the remember, and that weapon was unloaded, but there was enough of a charge that was in it that it did the damage. There was a TV show when I was growing up, Brian, in the 70s called Alias Smith and Jones, probably the best fun TV show ever. And it was canceled after one of those people had a prop accident with a prop gun, and it was a Western, and they died. So there is precedent, and people do die from these things. So the involuntary nature of the manslaughter. Let's talk about David Halls. David Halls, you're talking about assistant director. So he pleads on the nose to negligent use of a firearm. Now, when used as a sentence enhancement, that can add up to 5 years of a prison sentence. You get what I'm saying? Like in Detroit, one with the gun gets you 2, right? So in the day. So here, did he take a chance? No, because he pled on the nose rather to a misdemeanor. And what he did is he literally said, okay, I'll take this charge, which is a lesser and included offense, to bring the felony off the table. Now, you got Baldwin and Gutierrez-Reed. They're charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, both of which are 4th-degree felonies. Now, in that, Brian, depending on the jury verdict, they can go anywhere from 18 months in jail with a couple of $1,000 fine to 5 years in prison and get the sentence enhancement of the misdemeanor with an additional 5 years. So this is why we're hearing all the smoke and mirrors about this caper, simply because there's jail time associated with it. If this was monetary, if this was a civil case just with the loss, Baldwin can take a hit. You know, so
exactly.
And SAG would come in with an attorney and some other people and stuff. And then you go, because I like this laser focus, you go from words like responsibility to duty. It's completely different, Brian.
So
responsibility is you have a responsibility to do something. That means there's sort of a check in the box thing that most people agree these things should, like, for example, use a different knife for your meat and your veg. Wash your hands after handling chicken in the kitchen before you go on to fill the glasses with orange juice for breakfast or whatever. Okay, so those are responsibilities that a person has to ensure what? To ensure the safety of the food and the delivery, all that. Okay, but a duty means that there's a legal standard that has been demonstrated that if you fail to do this, havoc ensues. You get what I'm trying to say? Where hijinks is going to lead to the death or protracted loss of limb or something, right? And so I think that's important, an important distinction, because what we're talking about here, Brian, is very simple. You brought up something that complicates it needlessly, meaning intentionally you did it. Don't get me wrong. You said, hey, listen, some armorers have to carry weapons because they're carrying weapons. Well, that totally makes sense.
Right.
But there's a definite, that never breaks leather. That's never coming out of the holster unless there's an armed hostile takeover, right? So the idea of having, for example, the idea of having just a couple of loose rounds that are live rounds, that's the sloppiest set I've ever heard of. So Andrea Reeb, if you know anything about Andrea Reeb, look her up, folks. Great special prosecutor assigned specifically to review the facts of this case. And we love facts. And she says a review of the evidence in the case clearly showed a pattern of criminal disregard for safety. You said it yourself. So the level of disregard was criminal. It wasn't just sloppy. And the second part of it is her comment in, I think it was NPR, but I don't want to say it. Look it up. You'll not you, Brian, but the folks listening. She said, and I quote, if any of these 3 people, Alec Baldwin, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, or David Halls, had done their job, Halyna Hutchins would be alive today. It's that simple. That's a bold statement. And for a special prosecutor to make that, that means that she's got a number of facts to back it up, because that becomes the case in chief. The case in chief is the 4 corners of the document that they're going to go, the prosecutor's office, to court with and be in front of a jury. Now, why did they do it the way that they did? Because the involuntary manslaughter, the 4th-degree felonies, have a range, and the jury can determine the range. So they want to leave it up to the jury, where David Hall said, I'm not leaving shit up to a jury, right? I'm going to go straight in front of the judge and go, yes, I'm responsible for the negligent use of a firearm because it was my duty to check the firearm. So
well,
that's a bold move, and it's a smart move in his instance.
That's why I put that in there, because he did say on the record, he said it's a cold gun. So he's declaring that I've inspected this, I've done my duty, and I've recognized the fact that everything is safe with this weapon. And in fact, it was not. So I'm assuming when I read that quote, that's why I was like, oh, well, I see why he took a plea deal, because it was pretty obvious here. Like, you clearly did not check that. And because
so
of
what will your
said,
attorney say, Brian?
Yeah.
Your attorney will say, because it's Friday, what's the first thing your attorney should tell you?
Shut the fuck up Friday, right?
Exactly. There's number one. And the second thing is that, listen, if there are comments that you have made and they're on YouTube and Twitter and other people are testifying to the fact, you have to do one of two things. You aggressively go after and say, that wasn't me, they're all liars, I'm the only one telling the truth. Or you fall on your sword, Brian, and you fall on your sword early enough that you say, that thing, I did that thing. But all these other things because look, where do you want to be tried? I want to be tried in a court of law, not the court of innuendo on the streets. You get what I'm trying to say?
The court of commentary. So
exactly. And you've seen how bad that goes.
So, this is obviously, for the legal side of it, an interesting case, because you started to mention it, and you're getting into the fact of, in this part, they're saying he had a duty to do certain things, so therefore he's now responsible and negligent, and it's rising to there's enough criminal negligence here, or there's enough negligence, there's enough lack of standards to the fact where it's now a criminal act, and clearly the special prosecutor,
that's the difference. So
the special prosecutor feels that there's enough going on there,
enough to go on, or she would have never said it.
So it wasn't a freak accident out of nowhere. So
you have a responsibility to walk around your car and make sure your kid's not behind your car before you back out. Yet every year, thousands of kids are injured, and dozens die when somebody backs over their own child. We see those reports, are horrific reports, but it happens all over the world. Okay, that's a responsibility. You have a responsibility to do it. That's what makes it non-criminal. You get what I'm trying to say? Now, if you got in an argument in the house and said, hey, kiss my ass, and you ran out, and you had a couple of drinks in you, and you threw it in reverse and lit up the tires, and you hit the neighbor's kid, now we're talking about different. Criminal, because you had a duty. You see, and it's really that simple when it comes down to it. You're going to have some legal pundit that's going to come on and go, well, yes, but this and that. The bottom line is, Brian, they were on a set. They had demonstrated sloppy activities in the past. It was only likely to get worse. There were allegations that they actually went out shooting live rounds while they were somewhere on the set, and then came back and filmed some other stuff. You even said that there was a willy-nilly approach to the rehearsal of the shootout scenes with some neg discharges, right? I mean, think about that. Those are the type of things that would demonstrate to a reasonable person that it was dangerous there. And look, you know what we're not talking about? We're not talking about the happy head. There's a distinct difference. Like Colorado Springs and can't remember the other city, a couple of hours apart, kids were in the car. Parents went into the marijuana dispensary. Kids were screwing around under the seat, found the gun, and one kid shot the other kid to death. Okay, that's the happy head. The net's flooded with these danger warning messages, but they're delayed. Why? Because it's the years and years of self-inflicted psychological abuse and wounds that we get from our request for immediate gratification. So instead of the kid looking at that gun and going, that's gun, it's dangerous, that kid looks at the gun and says, every TV show, every game that I play, all this other stuff, and wow, this is amazing. Why would dad have this under the seat, or mom, right? Do you get the difference there? So we're responsible for setting up the incidents that happens. And that leads us into for example, the case you alluded to in your prologue. In the past 5 years that I know of, 6 hunters have been shot by their own dogs. 6.
Yeah.
Okay. So many of those resulted in the hunter dying.
That was there's a recent one too. The hunter this year, just a week or two ago,
just a couple of days ago.
Yeah, where the dog, they had it out of something. The gun was in the car, and then the dog ended up stepping on it and killed the guy in his own vehicle right there. But
happy head. Okay, so you have, your brain is set up with electrochemical impulses and responses, and they're specifically designed to keep you alive. For example, the acute stress response. You have the fight, flight, or freeze that turned into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, and now it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and faint, Brian,
Oh
because it's going to
gosh,
be, we're
people are
just
going
going
to
to
add
keep
more.
adding shit onto
That's
it.
what
Do you
everyone
get what I'm
seems
trying
to
to
be
say?
doing.
And
Yeah.
then, hey, make me a PhD because look, I've come up with it. But the central point is the acute stress response. Stop reading shitty books. Read one good one. Acute stress response says this: your prefrontal cortex runs what you're doing and how you're threading the needle and changing lanes and talking to your spouse and regulating the
Making
incoming information.
executive function, high
The
level decisions.
executive
Yeah.
decisions. The minute the brain goes, hey, there's a potential for stress, danger, or opportunity,
Right.
thinking is inhibited in the prefrontal cortex and goes to the
Immediately.
amygdalic responses. And the amygdala is all about knee jerk emotions, right now, quick decisions, because I got to do something to get out of harm's way. That's the difference. So when you're sitting there and you have the luxury of time, you have the luxury of thinking, hey, I better not clean my gun before I unload it.
Yeah.
But I remember an incident in our vehicle base where one of I'm not going to get into great detail, but a person had a Glock and the person dumped the mag on the Glock and didn't cycle around and show everybody around, or
Clear
eject
the weapon.
the
Yeah.
round in the chamber, clear the weapon, and show everybody that was around him. And they turned and aimed the weapon into the ground to make sure that the firing pin wasn't engaged, and they cranked off a 9mm round. And it's like, whose weapon is that? My weapon. How long have you carried that weapon? 11 years. Have you ever had a negligent discharge? No. Why did you have one today? Because all your fellow wranglers were standing around. They were all at the weapons barrel cleaning their weapons, and you got the happy head. What's a happy head? Overwhelmed. I'm flooded with all of this emotion that's coming along with it. Hey, I'm under the gun. People, no pun intended. I'm being watched. I better do this right because I'm the resident expert. Have we ever seen instances of that? Remember the DEA vid from many years ago that was on like YouTube? What did that DEA guy say in
Yeah,
front
he
of
was
that
saying, "Yeah, I'm the
weapons
only
class?
one who's
Only
qualified
one.
to do this." He pulled it out. I kept remembering, and then he's trying to reholster it, and he shot himself in the foot, I believe, and the round went off right in the class.
Yeah, but I've seen people shot itself in the
it.
leg. There's probably
Yeah, I've seen
hundreds of videos.
people
We're not talking about
unload
over penetration of rounds.
multiple
Yeah,
rounds
yeah,
into a clearing barrel as they're clearing their pistol. And
yes,
like, you don't know how to do this, do
yes.
you? And so
I've seen coppers crank off shotgun rounds when they're releasing their shotgun inside of the scout car to make sure that it's unloaded. Brian, think of
yeah,
that. So that can
pi-
only happen because of the happy head.
I've
That's it.
seen pistols, rifles, belt-fed weapon systems,
Yes.
shotguns. I've
Yeah.
seen all kinds of different precision bolt-action rifles. And people negligently discharge stuff, and it's just that you're not going through the
Yeah.
process that you're supposed to, and so
Yep.
this stuff happens, and you like to call that the happy head. Because
Yep.
it's very simple. Everyone can tell you basic weapon safety rules. Anyone who's ever had any type of even minimal training, just showing up to a range the first time firing a weapon, they're going to explain the safety rules. And so, how does this stuff get bypassed? Because I see it. I've seen it all the time. I've seen guys whose job is to shoot
Yes.
constantly, and that's all they do. And they probably shoot, thousands upon thousands of rounds every month, and still have some sort of issue. It's because of that even though when you put those simple steps in place, you can
Yes.
become overwhelmed, and you're not paying attention, as they say.
Yep.
Each little thing leads to other. I mean, it goes back to the Rust case of all of these other issues were contributing factors to Halyna Hutchins getting shot, because
Which became the proximate cause. You're exactly right.
And
Great
this
comment.
is why we talk about little things, and making sure people stick to the rules or standard operating procedures or whatever it is, or policies, because once you let it slide a little bit, it starts to slide a lot more, and then the momentum builds, and then it literally leads to a situation like this. And so I mean, there are plenty of examples of how this occurs, and then especially with the kid ones are obviously brutal.
Yes.
And then, of course, everything, you see so many where it says, where the explanation is so and so is cleaning their gun and which I instantly
Yeah.
am like, bullshit. you weren't cleaning your gun. Like you were fucking around with it. You were doing something stupid and you accidentally ripped the round off. And then you told everyone, oh, I was
Yes.
cleaning it and it didn't. So usually it's a BS story. But you know what I'm
Yep.
saying? Where it has nothing to do with what they were actually doing. And that the question is, or what they're saying on this and why it's becoming a criminal rise to the level of criminality is because all of those measures were not in place. No one adhered to
Yes.
any policies or safety or procedures.
It
No one
was
at some
willy
point,
nilly.
yeah, or earlier
Catch as
on
catch can.
could have
Exactly.
said, "Hey, hold up here. We're
Yep.
having a series of issues. We need to
Yep.
stop because this all happens." And I mean, I remember being on Camp Pendleton when a Marine was killed, and it was during a
I do
training
remember
exercise
that.
because one of the guys left the field for a day, he had to go do something, came back. They went from live fire the next day into blank fire training, and he didn't get cleared out properly, and they were just doing a training exercise, and a young Marine who was acting as a role player was literally shot right in the head and killed because the guy shooting him thought he had didn't know he had live rounds in that magazine as they were
Yes.
going through the exercise, and so it happens, and it
I,
happens
I sent you
frequently.
one that'll be in the marginal data, Brian, will be in the episode notes. I sent you the one where in Punta Gorda, Florida, they were doing the training exercise and they enlisted the aid of citizens to come in and be the
That's
role
right.
players, and one got shot. I mean, listen, so this speaks directly back to the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Your prefrontal cortex will tell you we can prevent this by taping blue the magazines that have the blanks and taping red the magazines that contain the live rounds. We'll also make sure that we put a red or yellow, some bright color, muzzle device that's going to determine that, hey, this is not only a blank firing adapter, but it'll make sure that we don't accidentally shoot somebody. And then we do Brian, the problem with those is they all reside in the prefrontal cortex. They reside in our executive center. Then once we get out there and we've been shooting for a while and everything is going, and there's a little bit more of a stress
Yeah.
response in there, the stress response now inhibits our clear thought. And this is why, listen, you educate for the certain, you train for the uncertain. This is why training needs to take over. Why do you have a range safety officer? Because the range safety officer stays aloof from everybody's emotions and goes, that's a dangerous act, cease fire. And who can call a ceasefire? Everybody. And we talk about those things all the time, Brian. Why? Because it's the group that has to save the individual, because sometimes the individual drives faster than headlights. For example, one of Baldwin's earliest arguments was, hey, I picked up the gun and it went off. Okay, so we know how unlikely that is. And it's so
I didn't read
remarkable,
that. I
that
mean,
claim.
the story came out that he
That
was
was within the first couple of days.
well,
Go
he
ahead.
was practicing. I mean, the woman he shot was telling him to do exactly what he was doing at the time. No, do it this, because he was practicing and drawing. And she was saying, "Hey, now try it this. Let's try it from this angle. Okay, do it over." I mean,
Yes.
which is also insane because she's sitting there telling him what to do, which ended up
Shoot me.
being the thing that killed her.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I mean that's why this case, because I can I could go either way with this, right? Meaning I could take either
Right.
side on the case, either for or against Baldwin. I think um, with the charging him in a sense as because he's like the producer of the film, right? Not
Right.
just one of the actors. That makes more sense to me than him being as an actor charged, meaning um, your overall if he's overall responsible for that film, that includes the safety and well-being of everyone working on that film, right? So I understand
Right.
that from in terms of negligence, in terms of duty, but being the person there as an actor, there, because of course everyone comes out that no, as an actor and you're not supposed to, and that's fucking bullshit, man. That's not their job on the set. There's their role there, and this is why the difference between this and let's say like something happening in training, or the woman who was shot during the training with the
Yeah.
police agency, like it's different because this is a movie. This isn't where people are getting killed and shot. It's acting. It's not real. Yes, you still have a certain duty here, but this person was so high that, because if you can read in all about the woman who's the armor, was completely unqualified for this position and what she was doing. She was completely in over her head, like did not have any protocols and procedures in place, basic stuff that anyone would know, like she just did not follow. So to me,
Right.
if we're going to hold people responsible, let's hold people responsible. Or are we just going, well, Alec Baldwin's a big name, I don't like him either, let's
Right.
hold him responsible too? Because the precedent for that is what bothers me. It's because, okay,
Oh, I
well,
agree.
if that's the case,
This
then
is one of the
then
rare
Greg,
times.
I sell you a gun and you go kill a bunch of
Yeah.
people. Am I responsible for that? I
Well,
mean,
that's an argument that's going on right now.
well, that's what
I
I'm
would say
saying
this is one
is
of the
that
few times that I think your central argument has to have a caveat, because I would disagree with this point only. The law says hot potato. You were holding the gun when it went off, so you're responsible in some fashion. Now, whether that responsibility goes up to a duty, I
but
would say that you have an extra duty of care and caution, because you knew or should have known that the thing you're holding is a gun, not a
but
potato,
what if the thing I
not
knew I was
a
holding, but
television set.
okay, but if I am firing a um little, the little Nerf guns that shoot little darts,
Yep.
right? And it's
Yep.
that, and it somehow hits someone in an eye. Yeah, it doesn't kill them, but it
You're
leaving
responsible.
them permanently disabled or something like that, and it can't see out of that eye. At no point did I think that Nerf gun could even
Doesn't
inflict
matter
that
what you
type of
thought.
pain. But what you know what I'm saying? But it says
Right.
the prop gun
The
on
law
set is
says
supposed to
it's a
be
gun,
but it's a prop gun, and that's the thing is if
but
I'm
it's a
sitting here
gun.
and I think it's a prop
It has
gun,
gun in the word.
but what
It
if I
has
didn't know
gun in
that?
the
What if
actual
I thought
description. Doesn't
that
matter.
this weapon system was only meant to fire blank rounds and could not fire a live round? Then
You're
how, like,
justifying negligence, because the idea is that you, as the person that's going to hold that gun, has the duty to ensure that that thing that you're holding, for example, the lawsuits against the automotive industry because they named the thing in the back seat the shelf, the rear shelf in a car, and so some guy in Hamtramck put a
put something
bowling
on
ball
there?
on it. When they
Yeah,
stopped, it came forward and it killed the person. Now, no reasonable person would ever be able to create that,
right,
even in a movie script, right?
right.
But you're still responsible. So the idea is, was it criminal? That's the difference here.
Well, that's what
Is
I'm saying
it was
is I
non-criminal, but it's still manslaughter, because he knew or should have known that the thing he was holding was a gun, and it had even the most remote possibility to create an injury. And that's why I'm saying that we need to take the Alec Baldwin name out of it,
but
and we need to say that anybody that's holding a tool that could be used in that manner is going to be responsible.
and
You're driving a car, you're
but
responsible.
well, of course, but that's if because a car could, kill someone. But if a prop gun wasn't designed
Yes.
to do that, then why? If you're looking at the
How
and
did it
oh,
then?
there's a prop gun. Well, yeah, but that's what I'm saying is he didn't know and he should not have known. Right. If I'm sitting here and you tell me,
Oh,
Greg, you're the expert, you say, hey, this is
yeah.
a prop gun and you can do this and you can
Yes.
point it at people because this is a movie and this is what you've been doing your whole career with these things. Like you're assuming that this thing is safe. You may not even understand how that thing operates.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean,
You're
I
fighting a
think you're
logical
opening up the
argument, but it's wrong, because you have to take a look. Look, you know what prop guns look like. You've used them before. Most respond on some sort of blowback or internal air, something. And every single one that you've dealt with, you couldn't chamber a real round in it unless it was a real weapon that was
that was
using prop style ammo.
right,
Yes?
right,
Okay.
right.
So the idea is that, and I'm not arguing with you, I'm telling you what the law says. The law will say in it, like, for example, we talked about this one time before years ago, the horse Square D. The horse's name was Twister and it injured somebody. So they renamed the horse Square D, Square Deal, right?
Yeah.
And why? Because they got their asses sued because the horse was called Twister. And they asked the guy, well, why'd you call it Twister? And he goes, well, first time a guest got on, that horse unwound. So that guest came and wrote down, I understand that horses are inherently dangerous, but I still want to ride the horse at your ranch. They went and they said, here's your horse, Twister. And that guest still got on it. And the argument was, well, if you knew or should have known that it's a horse and it's dangerous by nature and you still got on a horse named Twister, you get the way that argument goes? That's why they have to go in front of a jury trial, because the law is explicit and it's clear. And Baldwin was, I would counter part of your argument, which is a very well-made argument, and you sound like a defense attorney. I would counter part of it by saying Baldwin should have known better because he was on sets where shit was tight and it went well. He was, Jack Ryan for a lot of those movies where there was shoot 'em ups all the time in that. If you drive your car past the speed limit and you haven't checked the oil and you haven't inflated the tires and your car goes wrong, it's not the manufacturer that's the fault. It's you. And what he did is he took what he thought to be a prop weapon and look, even pointing it at another human being, you're going to say, yeah, but that was routine. Routine doesn't mean it was okay. That's all my point is. You see where I'm trying to say? So here is a good cautionary tale that, look, these things happen. Brian, we talked about it the other day, you and I offline. If you're in a hotel, you should expect that when you're laying in bed, a round can come winging through the floor and kill you, through the ceiling and kill you, or through one of the walls and kill you. Why? Because those places become hotbeds of shootouts. We know that. And over-penetration in those rooms is something that's common. Now, do I have to worry about that every day? Well, every day I'm in a hotel, I should consider it at least. Now, what about gas stations? There were 80 to 100 rounds fired just a couple of days ago in that California gas station shooting. Yeah. All of those rounds had a name on it, Brown. They all went somewhere. Do you get what I'm trying to say? So we, you and I, as members of the public, have to be cautious, more cautious, when we're in an area where a shooting might occur.
I guess then and I understand what you're arguing legally here, but it's still obviously it would be up to a jury. And I think there's a different set of circumstances for the woman who is the armor there and for the actor firing the weapon. I really
absolutely
there's completely different standards.
Absolutely,
so why are they being charged with the same crime? And so the idea is and this is also way, right. This is also why I said I could understand if Alec Baldwin was overall in charge producer of this, that you're holding him liability and maybe obviously in civil trial or some overall negligence. I get that, because then you're saying if you're overall in charge, you have a duty. That I understand, but it's almost, if we keep spread loading the responsibility for all these things that happen, I'm all about accountability and holding the person accountable, but I don't like doing the second and third and fourth relationship to that, and they should have done something too. It's like,
yeah, but it's not. I agree with your central argument.
You get what I'm saying? I feel like it's
I would ask you to consider the term
too much.
Yeah, and we don't want overreach. You're exactly right. I absolutely should be minimal. Laser, not flashlight. So, but I want you to take a look at the term felony stupid. So one of the ways that you determine how bad an incident is it felony stupid? Brian, would you agree that pointing a gun at anybody, anytime, one of the first rules you learn is a laser rule, treat every weapon as if it's loaded. Yeah. So your argument that it's a prop gun and it was handled by other people, it's well taken argument, but it doesn't hold water when it comes down to the end that Baldwin knew or should have known that there was a greater risk of harm when he took a prop gun with some sort of chemical charge that was in it and aimed it at any part of his or another human's body. And that's what made it criminally negligent. He's not a criminal when it comes to the point that he intentionally did.
No, there was no intent.
Unintentionally.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
that's all I'm saying.
And I get that. And again, I agree. And it's a logical argument. What I'm saying is that because of the context of the situation. And what about Halyna Hutchins? She was telling him to do what he did. She was telling him, point it here. Now, okay, now
listen,
can you shift
so now you're going into civil territory.
Well, but what I'm saying is then would we say
when
that
it comes up?
But here's the thing. Is
she's standing in front of a loaded weapon.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
She's responsible.
Well, and she was telling
nobody wants to say that.
So she bears partial responsibility in this as well. But you can't. I mean, but everyone going, well, she's the victim. Yeah,
but that doesn't lessen his. That doesn't diminish his responsibility. They're equally. If she had not been there, she would have not got shot. If she would have said, "This is reckless and dangerous," she would have not got shot. But she's not the only reason it happened. Okay. There's a line of people that stood up and said, I checked this weapon. Here's your weapon. Yeah. Here, Alec, hold the weapon. And that's what the law says. The law says, look,
which is why the one guy took a plea deal, because he's like, there's no beating this.
He knew better.
I clearly screwed up, and I announced that everything was fine when it clearly was not. Therefore, I am negligent. There was no fighting that. There was just but because of he said and did what he did. If he had just handed the gun over to him, would have been a different case. But you know what I'm saying?
He would have had more of a level playing ground. I absolutely agree with that. You get what I'm trying to say? He would have still been charged to some degree. Right? Because it's like a chain of custody argument. Who handled that gun? And the civil lawsuit's going to go all the way back to the manufacturer. The manufacturer is going to say it wasn't a prop gun. It was a real gun because you could put both types of ammo. You see the convoluted legal argument. But I'm saying just at its base, anytime you pick up something where a projectile is coming out of it, even a pop gun, you should know you shouldn't aim it at somebody because you might hurt that person. And that's what the law is saying. The law is saying, look, let's be fair, let's be equitable. Somebody's dead here, so somebody has to be accountable. You said that perfectly in your argument. The idea of it not being as fair for one than the other, that's for a bench trial or a jury. And then the Supreme Court to come in and say, hey, you overstepped. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about overreach or overstepping the bounds. Right. But I think here, the investigation and the special prosecutor, Andrea, came to a reasonable conclusion saying, had it not been for, if not for these factors and this sloppy set, she'd be alive today. Well, that, now, and she didn't include the name of the victim, but I agree with you that the victim bears some responsibility. And this isn't victim blaming. It's if you're standing there and somebody at a party starts waving around a gun, you have a duty or responsibility to leave or say stop. Right?
Yeah. And I mean, you say, yeah, go ahead, point it at me, and that person ends up shooting you. Like you are obviously very much part of the situation. You have to be. You added to the equation. You know what I mean? You led to that. You
added a level of complexity that has to be accounted for. I totally agree with you, buddy.
And so that's just kind of my argument. Obviously, I want one, you have to balance one, people have to be held responsible for their actions, and then you have to set a precedent going forward specifically for that industry too, to change how things are done. You're going to get all the pundits coming on or people commenting like, oh, we never do. That's not how it works on any set I've ever been on. Which is fucking bullshit. They're all
it really is.
They've all done shitty, stupid, reckless things before too. So I mean, but what it is my concern is just the legal precedent for this. If all of those people
I agree with you,
are charged or held accountable, then that now becomes something that going forward. I don't like the spread of response. I like starting with the person that is directly responsible for it should be held accountable. It's like the school shootings. Right. You know what I mean? Like, how about we start with the person who walked into school and murdered a bunch of people? Let's start there.
Oh, exactly.
Who's accountable.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
But let's your logic is sound. But let's not make a quantum leap of logic in this specific incident, because here everybody is responsible. Everybody. So if you were a financier on this film, you have the duty to ensure that the film is going to be legally compliant. If you funded this film, you, by law, should have sent somebody to the scene to check out the incident or the shoot location before the incident to say, hey, these bastards are being reckless and carefree out here. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? There's basic protocols.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Followed,
like,
we wouldn't have
I wouldn't say that. No, as an investor in a movie, no, it's not your role to do that. There's someone there who's responsible for doing that. Now, you should understand that
it's your money. You're responsible.
Yeah, but that's
my argument.
I don't think you bear any.
That's what the law
legal
says.
Responsibility if you invest in something.
Of course you do.
Someone else there.
Of course you do.
On this situation. That's a bit of a stretch.
Absolutely.
That an investor in the movie
not a stretch at all.
Be held accountable.
Why wouldn't you sue the investor for the movie? Because the investor of the movie has a duty to understand that it's not criminal. That's the difference.
Yeah,
that's the exact difference that I'm trying to make here.
Sure, if you want to make a civil case,
felony
you can make
case.
You can make a civil case out of the person who delivered the fucking sandwiches that day and didn't report the fact that they saw a live round on the ground. I mean, I don't know. Like, you can go
because they were negligent.
Civil, you can get anywhere. I'm talking about criminally here because that's there's supposed to be people who are responsible for that. If they didn't do their job, then they need to be held responsible for not doing their job.
Baldwin was responsible for pulling the trigger. Baldwin knew or should have known that weapons have projectiles. I'm just saying, look, I agree with you. The standard from civil to criminal is different, but I'm saying that criminal negligence here was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecutor would have never made those statements and brought it forward. I think that there's also a political angle here where people want to beat their chest and say, hey, look, we're going after Baldwin or stuff. I think that's emotional and we got to take that out of it.
Yeah, well, there's going to be people, of course, like that's going to be F this guy and you think you can get it.
But Hollywood too. They hate Hollywood and then they hate guns.
Of course.
And then they hate
okay.
Right?
Those are they certainly don't help in any manner with the case. Just look
No.
at what actually could. And I agree, because all of the reports just openly that I've read in any reporting of what people on the crew said, and we discussed it, but there was clearly this, and this is why criminal charges were brought. This wasn't some incident where there was some odd, because I think you brought up the one with like Brandon Lee, and that was not even a
Yep.
live round in there. It was something with
Nope.
the fake
Exactly.
charge that
Some
they
squib
used.
load thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
it
so, and
right.
that's not what happened here, where everything else was fine.
Nope.
There was all kinds of things going on to this during the filming of this movie, and people were reporting it, and people were saying to the people in charge, to the producer, saying, "Hey, this is going on. We're going to be out of here. You know, this is dangerous. You're playing it fast and loose." So when those things
That's the
occur,
key.
I
Yes.
you can't deny any of that. I mean, that's we
Right.
see that how many times with different cases that we saw, where people are like, how
We
does this
do.
happen? And we go,
Exactly.
well, this is how it happens when you have a culture of no one taking responsibility and no safety measures in place. You're
Right.
going, it's a matter of time before something catastrophic happens. It's not
So
if, it's when.
no. And you're Brian, I don't want you to get me wrong. You're exactly right. So let's approach a different argument going in the same direction from physiology and psychology. So you know that I'm not a huge fan of the appendix carry. And the reason is that I've seen a couple of incidents where people seated in their police car have shot themselves. And
Right.
the idea that when they're standing or seated or crouching or just getting out of the vehicle, the muzzle is oriented towards their groin, which has a lot of significance. Their
Right.
femoral artery, you get
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say? And in some instances, I've seen it in internal organs. And you know what? With a tactical thigh holster and also drawing from within a car, I've seen a bunch of people shoot a car, but none of those people shot themselves.
Yeah.
So my simple argument is not based on you being a subject matter expert with
Right.
quick draw and shooting and everything else.
Yeah.
It's just from what I've seen, I can tell you I saw more injuries and fatalities from this than from that. Now, somebody could come in and go, yeah, but Greg, this has only been around for this long. And because of this long duration, these outnumber these. But that's not my argument, right?
Yeah.
You see it? So this is the thing, is we're closely aligned on Rust, but our arguments start to go off here with level of responsibility.
Yes.
And I agree with your argument, but I'm telling you that the law in this instance is going to be a cold, harsh mistress.
Oh, if you, yeah.
Because when like, I'll tell you right now, they better go for a jury,
Yeah.
because
Oh,
if
they're
they went to
gonna.
a bench trial,
Yeah.
it would be very decisive. Yeah.
If you were, if
And so what's the chance on a jury? They put Baldwin up there and everybody goes, oh, it's Alec
it's Alec
Baldwin. You
Baldwin,
see what I'm
yeah,
trying to
I
say?
know,
And he's
I
a
know.
human. So
Oh
that's what
yeah.
they're going to do.
No,
You know,
and it's
right. That's our
I,
central argument. Our central
you
point,
can't, you,
I think.
I'm a, yes. So it went, if you were to ask me to take, to bet on this trial, it's not looking
Yeah.
good for Alec Baldwin. However, anything can happen with a jury. And two, I think, if to make some sort of prediction, I think he's going to be held criminally liable. I think he's going to be found guilty in some small charge. I think what they
So
end up,
what should he do?
the
Predict.
sentencing,
What
I
should he
think,
do?
what do you mean in the court, what he should do?
In the criminal felonious part of the trial, adding 2 felonies and a misdemeanor. I know what your prediction is because we've talked about this before, but I will go on record saying that if he doesn't take a plea, he's a moron. And the plea won't have anything to do with the civil case. And in the civil case, I think you should say, mea culpa, here's the payout, and work on that.
Yeah.
Because, Brian, in this instance, I think the smartest guy was the AP, the assistant producer, that said, yeah, I'll plead to a misdemeanor. And you know why? Because culpability-wise, okay, the idea is that I don't think even though Baldwin has a great argument, and you've emboldened his argument a number of times today, I think at the end of the day, the law is going to look at it and go very binary. Guilty, not guilty. And if he gets guilty of a felony, even if they drop it down to a lower, lesser included offense for that manslaughter, it's still a felony, Brian. 4th degree felony is not a big felony, right? But it's
still a
felony.
felony.
And that big F means something.
Yeah.
That means jail time over a year, you know, and we're not talking about probation. And listen, they can give him credit, and you credit for time served, meaning they can give him credit for psychological time served, because you brought up a great point. This devastated him.
Yeah,
it impacted his career. Now, the family of the poor Ukrainian AP is not going to give a damn about that. They want justice for their daughter, of course. But you also pointed out that the daughter should have known, or, look, if it was the daughter's first film, I think it's a different argument. But she was on miniseries, she was on other film sets, she had done other short films. The more you know, the more you should have thrown in the towel and said something's wrong here. Doesn't pass the smell test. We're not, because weapons, Brian, weapons kill people. That's why they're called weapons. In this case, it's just dangerous, buddy.
I agree. I mean, obviously, his attorneys think that they can fight it, and win with a jury.
Attorneys do, because they get paid.
Right. And so,
an attorney doesn't work for society unless they're a prosecuting attorney. The defense attorney works specifically for you to get you off on the charges. And right now, some defense attorneys listening and going, "Hey, F you. Well, do me a favor, get on the call and you explain what your role is, because your role is, in fact, to do that." And you're saying, yes, but we're preserving the law for all good people to set the precedent. Yeah, but in this case, what you're doing is you're gambling that the jury trial will find Baldwin guilty of a lesser included offense because it's Baldwin. And that's just as bullshit as charging Baldwin because he's Baldwin. You see what I'm trying to say? We can't win there. You know what you want? I would predict this too. Brian, I think at the end of the day, you want this to make shoots safer, meaning film shoots.
Yeah.
And the way to make it safer is somebody's got to pay and somebody's got to learn from this event. If we can get there without somebody spending time in jail, I'm okay with that. But we got to get there. Well, at the end of the day,
that's the thing, is that obviously there was no intent behind this, and so
yes.
But people need to be held responsible. It was a tragedy, but it was a completely preventable tragedy. And so, what's the learning point?
If you fall asleep at the wheel of your car,
and that's
okay, and you kill somebody.
But and that's also part of my reason about my concern about the scope and precedent, because I believe holding people accountable 100%, but I don't like when that scope gets so big that now it's everyone's fault, because if it's everyone's fault, then it's no one's fault. But
it's no one's fault, and that's a great argument, by the
way. And that's always my concern with any of these is this the best way to hold someone accountable, or is this going to change something in that industry to make it more safer? That should be the goal.
Right.
Now, is this one?
I totally agree.
Will this help achieve that goal? I don't know. I don't see a clear line there. If I think on the civil side that stuff happens, that's why you see people sue auto manufacturers or sue, the McDonald's, or sue this, because that's how we live in a litigious society. And I don't mean that in a negative manner, actually, it's because someone can sue McDonald's rather than going and fucking blowing up a McDonald's. You know what I'm saying? And that's a good thing. You need to hold them accountable, and then they change what they do in their practices.
Voting
because
and
they don't,
suing are ways of adjusting things.
And
they're legal ways. They're nonviolent ways.
Yeah. And so that was my only concern with, was there some other motivation behind it? But it's clear. It's very clear, the facts of the case of what was going on in this movie set. I mean, it doesn't take much research to dig into these articles and see what the people on the set said, see just what the evidence it is now, and there's likely more coming out at trial, right? Of the testimony and what they found on the set. And it was egregious in terms of just a total lack of safety. So it was, once that starts to occur, these situations become inevitable. And that happens, which is why we brought up the examples on a personal level, even with folks who deal with firearms all the time. I mean, this is a movie set. I've seen it in all kinds of situations, and and this is with professionals whose job was involved in one of the parts of their job was they were carrying a gun and trained in that weapon system. And those things happen, and they happen, for the same reason, a lack of overall. It's always, that's why, like, the Marine Corps always called it a negligent discharge, because you're negligent, like meaning you did something wrong.
And there's an argument there. There's a great point, because there's an argument there that's brewing in the police community, because a lot of coppers now were former soldiers, not as much back when I was in. It was a really odd blend. And coppers are saying never call it a negligent discharge, because you're immediately saying you were negligent with your firearm in this incident. So it's an accidental.
Yeah,
you get what I'm trying to say? It's merely an accident.
That's the Army term for it, I think.
Thank you. But listen,
is.
what
they call it
you're
an
doing
AD.
is holding somebody accountable. Exactly. Look, we would not be talking about this if it wasn't Baldwin. If this was a high school play where a prop went wrong and killed somebody, we wouldn't be talking about it. It would already be a local article and it would be done. but we're talking about trained, veteran, experienced personnel that were cutting corners because it appears as though they were taking large chances with safety that they shouldn't have been taken. So at the end of the day, somebody's got to be responsible for it because there was a duty to hold them to a higher standard. And guess what? When that wheel stops, when you're playing spin the bottle, if you're playing all in, you got to kiss whoever that bottle stops on. And that's where we are. And this was, and I just invoked the felony stupid rule. It was felony stupid to do this. Brian, you and I on LinkedIn sometimes have seen situations where people are grab assing around and chasing each other in vehicles, and they're all calling it training. It's training until somebody in those gets killed or injured, and then all of a sudden you hold it up and you go, "What was this?"
Well, we were making a video. All of this? We were making a video for Instagram and our cool guy clips. Yep, and I know that stuff happens more than people think because they somehow forget to upload those videos where it goes catastrophically wrong.
Happy head, gender reveal party.
Yep.
Happy
Perfect
head.
example.
Do they result in death and injury? Come on.
Oh yeah. Or
there's your happy head.
Tens of millions of dollars of fire damage. Yeah, absolutely.
Think about that for a minute. You know, so that's all we're saying. And look, I rarely disagree with Brian's logical outcome. This is completely personality based, only because I've seen how a couple of these cases have gone before. And so I was in the trenches to see the fight. And Brian is speaking of the logical, likely outcome that he would suspect. And I'm telling you, and you said it yourself, Brian, juries can go anywhere.
They can go either way.
You get what I'm saying? If we were talking a bench trial, we'd have been done talking 30 minutes ago. But we're both talking about a jury trial. And then when you go to civil, God only knows.
Yeah, you know? and that again, that's going to be completely different. But not that. Yeah. I'm sure. You know, Alec Baldwin will likely just settle that out of court. You know what I'm saying? Yes. I'm assuming if he hasn't done something like that already. I mean, he was good friends with this woman that he killed. You know what I'm saying? He did know her and her family and everyone.
Of course.
So
and again, Brian, there was no intent. Okay, so there, if they had a previous argument, or if he had been reckless like this before,
that was
again, the trajectory changes everything. It's Baldwin. It's Baldwin who had some of the funniest skits on Saturday Night Live. You get what I'm trying to say? And he was no offense, he was a big buffoon that day. We all do that though, Brian.
Yes.
We all go up and we say, hey, I'm going to give the toast at the wedding. So I'm going to stand on that shitty chair over there and hold up my glass. And we do it and we fall down and we make an ass of ourselves. But it didn't kill somebody. And that wasn't criminal because the amount of negligence that I did was just self-inflicted. That's what I'm trying to say here, is that it caused somebody's death. And like you said, right from the beginning, somebody must be held accountable.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of a good spot to sort of end on. Again, we'll see how this plays out, or if anything else comes to light. Some of this stuff, and obviously the charges were just brought in the last week or two, I think. And so you know, we'll
tell us what you think is going to happen. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and you know, stay tuned. We also have more on the Patreon side. We have our textbook coming out here pretty soon, so we're going to be using that in a number of ways for those who come to our in-person courses and a few other places.
McGraw-Hill.
We'll be available very soon. Waiting on them, the folks at McGraw-Hill, on just a couple things. You gotta, I don't know, cross the T's, dot the lowercase J's. I'm not sure what all, they're finishing up their part of it, and then that'll be out. But we do appreciate everyone for listening, and then for some of you who reach out, please continue to do so. Ask questions, stuff that you want us to cover or talk about, because we'd like to make sure that we're giving everyone here who's listening what they need, and you know, spreading the knowledge. So I appreciate everyone tuning in, and And it's Friday that we're recording this, Greg. And as any good attorney will tell you, it's shut the fuck up Friday.
Exactly.
To
Folks, it's not
keep your mouth shut.
Use to that word. That comes from some very, very smart and logical people. So follow that rule all the time. I want an attorney. Put me in my jail cell or let me go. I'm not saying a word. You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's the best way to do things.
Good stuff.
So, all right. I think that's good, Greg. Thanks everyone again for tuning in. Don't forget that training changes behavior.